Thankfully, in each and every one of these instances, the actual end product was vastly superior to the shoddy teaser footage, and often bizarre sequences that were thrown together in these lackluster advertisements. But that still won't change the fact that you would have been forgiven for initially thinking about giving the following eventual hit flicks a big old miss after being put through the all-round awfulness on show in these particularly dreadful trailers. Gareth here from Whatculture.com, and here are 10 terrible movie trailers then the film racked. Number 10. How to Train Your Dragon. It's often forgotten just how underwhelming the first look at DreamWorks' first ever How to Train Your Dragon animated flick actually was. This may have been the same studio that brought folks everything from the Shrek to the Kung Fu Panda franchises, but the initial look at the first big screen outing for Hiccup, Toothless, and the rest of the gang just felt like another forgettable family caper destined to be forgotten about, like the prior year's So-So Monsters vs. Aliens picture. That Jay Baruchel narrated early glimpse into the lives of the folks of Burke, and their daily struggle with fire-breathing pests, barely highlighted just how much of a charming and unexpectedly deep tale was heading fans' way. And the consistently gorgeous animation that would eventually become a trademark of the franchise is also largely undersold here in favor of focusing on some of the poorest one-liners present in the entire feature instead. Thankfully, the promise of an all-star voice cast consisting of the likes of Gerard Butler, Jonah Hill, David Tennant, and more was enough to convince most folks to give this dragon-stuffed future smash hit a chance. But many quite understandably found themselves wondering what all the fuss was about after witnessing this somewhat flat first look. Number 9. Jennifer's Body. In more of a case of a film being marketed entirely wrong, rather than the trailer itself just being straight up dreadful, the trailers for Karyn Kusama's eventual cult hit Jennifer's Body had most assuming they're about to witness little more than another dumb slasher flick, starring some well-known faces. But the focus on all things sexy Megan Fox and her possessed Jennifer Check, showering down on various teenage victims, only really told half the story, and this shameless attempt to market the dark comedy towards horny young lads did a huge disservice to the real core of the flick, that being the central relationship between Jennifer and childhood bestie Needy. A blatant sex fantasy for boys, this most certainly was not. It was a commentary on girl hatred, sexuality, the death of innocence, as screenwriter Diablo Cody put it. Cody also lamented the fact the studio opted to market this to boys who like Megan Fox too. As the years would roll by though, Jennifer's Body would eventually go on to become an unquestionable feminist cult classic, with its wholly misleading marketing now acting as another damning reminder of the times it was initially released in back in 2009. Number 8. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. After sitting through the official trailer for Michael Gondry's then incoming apparent comedy by the name of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, yet another quirky and wholly bizarre slice of Jim Carrey shenanigans were what most were likely expecting to witness down the road. That could not have been further from what Gondry had been cooking up with this surreal exploration of a rather complicated relationship and how one copes with suffering or heartbreak though. The early trailer itself kicks off with an eerie infomercial selling the concept of having your troubling memories of a bad relationship erased by the Lacuna organization. So far so good. But then things take a strangely upbeat turn with the introduction of the Mr. Blue Sky tune and a splattering of joyful visuals that completely no-sell the heart-wrenching drama that was inbound. Eternal Sunshine ranks as easily one of the most impressive spins on the rom-com genre of all time, combining a genuinely deep and moving tale focused on a volatile romance with absolutely inspired filmmaking throughout. And those oddly vanilla first glimpses simply didn't do this masterful piece of work any justice in the slightest. Number 7. Hellboy. Achieving the polar opposite of what the most recent attempt to unleash Big Red onto the big screen did in 2018, Guillermo del Toro's first Hellboy outing had folks feeling a tad concerned as its release date edged closer. Whereas the David Arbor starring eventual flop at least had the sense to push the titular badass as the undoubted MVP of the upcoming creepy action fest, the 2004 Ron Perlman flick's teasers seemed to forget why folks wanted to see the picture in the first place. Instead of regularly showing off one of the finest superhero performances of its time, one boasting irresistible charm, depth, and boatloads of glorious violence, the trailer mostly told the story of what was on the way through the lens of the most boring personality it possessed, that being Rupert Evans' John Myers. Sure, there were still a few cheeky quips thrown in by the lovable demon, but Hellboy is mostly just shuffled into the rest of the supernatural BPRD pack, which is a rather unforgivable sin seeing as though his name is on the damn tin. Hey, that rhymed. All the awful marketing in the world still couldn't keep Perlman's Anung Unrama from stealing the show, and the film itself from smashing it, however. Number 6. Star Wars. Now sure to expect a gripping piece of teaser footage on par with the sort of regularly explosive chunks of action often found preceding features in cinemas today, all the way back in 1977 would be a little bit unfair. That being said, it's still pretty tough to imagine anyone sitting through the first look at George Lucas's ultimately groundbreaking jump to hyperspace that was Star Wars back in the late 70s, and thinking a game-changing space opera was on the way. The entire thing is just so damn peculiarly chopped together, you'd be forgiven for assuming a frightening dose of sci-fi horror centered around the unlikely romance between a large hairy Wookiee boy story, and a frequently frightened princess was being served up down the line. Many of the sequences looking unfinished, the awful sound mixing, it being tonally all over the place, and Han Solo's blaster not even firing off, blasts, have all helped immortalize this specific advertisement for the Skywalker Saga's starting first episode as one of the most infamously awful of its time. Thank goodness most weren't put off by whatever the hell this was, and chose to embrace the spectacle light years ahead of its time. Or perhaps one of the greatest franchises ever produced may have ended up like the title itself in the closing stretch of this dud of a trailer. Number 5. Frozen. There is absolutely no denying the fact that the little ball of frosty enthusiasm that is Olaf is one of Frozen's most consistently side-splitting elements. But Disney's animated epic comes equipped with far more than a few tiny snowman sight gags and one particularly adorable moose. The flat first look at the soon-to-be instant classic way back in June 2013, however, showed absolutely zero sign of any future iconic ballads or the central sisters who would help establish the winter masterpiece as one of the most beloved and well-crafted animated pictures of modern times. Instead, the aforementioned snowy mascot took center stage, battling over the right to possess his carrot nose with the furry Sven in a 90-second clip that sold the incoming Disney outing as little more than a sickly sweet slapstick entry that many a parent would likely dread being dragged to. When you were boasting some of the most catchy Disney anthems of recent times, captivating personalities like Elsa and Anna, and some of the most spectacular visuals ever committed to an animated project, why someone decided to put the spotlight onto a snowman and moose battling over a vegetable when trying to get folks on board with this eventual hit is anyone's guess. Number 4. The Matrix. It cannot be overstated just how much of an impact the Wachowskis' 1999 sci-fi outing by the name of The Matrix had on the movie-making business, meshing a gripping tale of humanity finding itself somehow trapped inside of a virtual reality with some of the most jaw-dropping and out-of-this-world visual effects ever to grace the big screen. Neo's quest to top of the machines is about as iconic as they come, yet the mind-blowing action and consistently engaging story that unfolds over the course of 136 minutes of brilliance was largely sold short when it came to the film's trailers, it must be said. In fact, one particular piece of marketing material spent around 2 minutes seemingly talking fans out of the idea of taking a chance on the Keanu Reeves starring action thriller, with much of the early look getting far too bogged down in exposition and unintentionally hilarious taglines like "You live as a slave." It's only in the final moments when the genuinely compelling action that would ultimately go on to immortalize The Matrix is finally given a moment to shine, though you likely nodded off long before Keanu let out his legendary "whoa." Number 3. Drive. Like many a casual moviegoer back in the early 2010s, one particularly frustrated individual assumed they were set for an action-packed Fast and Furious-style injection of fun when they settled down to take in the Ryan Gosling starring Drive back in 2011. But little did they know that this riveting feature focusing on a largely silent stunt/getaway driver had next to no interest in churning out countless edge-of-your-seat set pieces and cheesy one-liners. This was actually a somewhat relentless, consistently gritty and emotional neo-noir ride that was a whole lot more thoughtful than it looked in those early trailers. And that's precisely what led to the aforementioned Spectator going out of their way to sue the folks behind the feature for misleading them into thinking a story akin to a Vin Diesel petrolhead extravaganza was on the horizon. Yet while that person in particular may not have been too pleased about the surprise that was waiting for them upon purchasing a ticket for this cinematic trip, many others simply found themselves being unexpectedly treated to one of the most enthralling dramatic spins of the time. Number 2. Kingsman: The Secret Service. Vibrant, charming, refreshing, and constantly fun all rather accurately sum up the experience of taking in Matthew Vaughn's first Kingsman mission almost a decade ago. The fact the big screen adaptation based on the titular comic didn't try to just lazily follow in the footsteps of another rather well-known spy franchise was a cinematic breath of fresh air, with Taron Egerton's Eggsy brilliantly taking center stage as the chav-turned-super spy, alongside Colin Firth's effortlessly smooth Galahad, trying to foil Samuel L. Jackson's mesmerizing big bad throughout. In all honesty though, that all likely caught many off guard a touch on the back of Kingsman's official trailer. Said footage showcased the incoming action-packed spy thriller parody of sorts, as well, yet another dose of standard 007-esque espionage drama and little else. Again, there are definitely a few Bond flickers in there for sure, but there's a lot more joy and silliness to be found in the Secret Service than this particular trailer lets on, and you would have been forgiven for giving this apparent young Bond tale a miss based on this hugely bland and paint-by-numbers piece of advertising alone. Number 1. John Wick. Sticking with action movies that insanely undersold the absolute delight that was about to land in front of film fans in cinemas all around the globe, I'd love to tell you that few will ever forget the first time they laid eyes on the eventually iconic presence that would become John Wick. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In actual fact, throughout the marketing of Keanu Reeves' then latest dive into action thriller waters, many were led to believe that the story of a dude out for revenge after the murdering of his pet puppy was destined to be nothing more than another ordinary mindless popcorn flick. Oh, how wrong they were, eh? On top of hardly even touching on the tragedy that forges the foundation for Wick's spectacular rampage, not nearly enough time was spent fully highlighting just how damn stylish and inventive the hard-hitting return of Baba Yaga to his cold-hearted killing ways of old actually was. Instead, this uninspiring trailer carelessly chucked a few somewhat unremarkable stunts, visuals and one-liners at its audience, leading to a YouTube comment section overflowing with many a stunned fan claiming to have entirely underestimated John Wick going into the flick. And they unfortunately weren't the only ones, because I'm thinking he's back.